Britons are facing an income shock, the likes of which has not been seen in decades. That's at least what Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey has warned. It's really going to be a historic shock to real incomes, the bank's boss said at a conference organized by Brussels think tank Bruegel. The shock of energy prices will be more pronounced this year than in any single year in the 1970s. At that time, the high price increases would have dragged on for several years. We very much hope that this will not be the case now, but for a single year, it's a very, very big shock, he said. For the spring, the BOE expects an inflation rate of 8%, not least because of the expensive energy prices, but also higher import prices, and it could rise to 10% by autumn. In February, the price increase was 6.2%, the highest value in 30 years. 50 years ago, an embargo by the Arab member states of OPEC, the Association of Oil Producers, on deliveries to states that had supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War led to an oil price crisis in the Western industrialized nations. Soaring oil prices pushed up inflation and dampened demand. The years are considered a classic period of stagflation, during which stagnation in economic growth coincides with rising prices. The consequences of the sharp rise in energy prices are still being felt today. That's what Bailey warns about. We expect growth and demand to slow down. We are seeing the first indications and surveys on consumer confidence as well as on business expectations. Just recently, the UK's Office for Budget Responsibility forecast a cut in real incomes that would be sharper than at any time since records began 70 years ago. The Eurozone is facing an energy shock comparable to that of Great Britain, said Bailey, since the states are all dependent on the same gas market. The situation is different for the United States thanks to its own significant reserves. Consumers in Great Britain should nevertheless be hit particularly hard by the price increases. The country depends on gas like few others. Around 40% of electricity is generated using fossil fuels. In addition, 80% of the mostly old and poorly insulated stock of residential buildings is heated with it. Also 5 years ago, a large offshore gas storage facility was closed due to the associated costs. The country now only has storage capacity of 2% of annual consumption. Other large gas consumers have stocks of 20 to 30% and can cushion price fluctuations accordingly for longer. Structural problems in the supply market further exacerbate the problem there. After the liberalization of the energy market, an oligopoly structure initially emerged with 6 major suppliers dividing up the market. Rich salaries and dividends with high prices for consumers caused trouble. The next round of liberalization was heralded and the number of providers skyrocketed to around 70. Some of them offer innovative solutions such as consumption tracking or cheap off-peak tariffs. But most of them act as intermediaries, sometimes without securing their purchase prices in the long term. The rise in prices has meanwhile driven 24 of these providers into bankruptcy. Finally, in 2019, the government introduced caps on electricity and gas prices in response to complaints about high energy prices. This maximum price, which an average household pays per year, is set every 6 months by the regulatory authority Office of Gas and Electricity Markets, or Ofgem. In October, it was raised by 12% to £1,277. Prices really go up from April 1st by 54% to £1,971. In view of the price development, this should not be the end. Cornwall Insight analysts expect another hike of around a third to over £2,500 next October. Government countermeasures to cushion the impact of energy prices on consumers have so far been limited. Consumer confidence and consumption are likely to be dampened accordingly. In autumn, Finance Minister Rishi Sunak announced on an electricity and gas rebate of £200 per household. However, it is designed as a loan and must be repaid over the next 5 years. The petrol tax will be reduced by 5 pence per litre. Compared to the previous year, however, the cost of a litre of fuel has increased by an average of 40p. In addition, at the turn of the month, a tax increase is putting pressure on income. Many MPs had called for a postponement of the new tax, which is used to finance the healthcare system and is intended to help introduce a state care system. And I'm still wondering what the 350 million a week, what's happened to them? The Chancellor of the Exchequer, however, only raised the income threshold above which the tax is due. When Sunak announced his mini-budget, his Conservative Party colleagues celebrated the prospect of reducing income tax by 1 percentage point within the next 2 years. According to Paul Johnson, director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, taking into account the tax increases announced in recent months would cut disposable income considerably for most taxpayers. The announced steps will not be enough to protect poorer households from a major blow to living standards, Johnson said. The proper Johnson there, I mean. Bailey warned that this probably does not take into account all the consequences of the energy and geopolitical crisis. Unfortunately, there is likely to be more with the inflation shock, and the inflation will have much more in stock. That's what I had in my mind when I quoted Bailey there. And it's not looking good. It's looking good nowhere. But in Britain, it's particularly hard for the poorest at the moment. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.